Hi, today we're going to discuss standardized testing and what it means for education. Is it helpful or harmful to students? First, we're going to define what standardized testing is. It's any test that requires test takers to answer the same questions in the same way. The answers are then scored uniformly. Altogether, standardized testing is a controversial issue and the media has a lot to say about it.
In an article by Latasha Grandy, who is an expert in education reform, she promotes standardized testing in belief that it helps children, families, and schools. She promotes standardized testing because she believes that it allows comparison and evaluation between students and schools around the U.S., reveals inequity in treatments of students, race, background, and socioeconomic status, and finally, that the data from these tests helps families decide on schools.
In our next article by Valerie Strauss, an education writer for the Washington Post, she contradicts Gandhi's position. Strauss opposes standardized testing. She believes, as a whole, it's harmful to education. Altogether, she believes standardized tests are biased regarding the student's social class, ethnic, regional, and cultural differences. The tests, and particularly the large amount of tests, lead to stress and a negative attitude towards schooling. Finally, the tests only focus on and evaluate a limited number of skills.
Similarly to the previous article, Megan Erickson, a public school teacher in New York City, also promotes that standardized testing is more harmful than it is helpful. She believes that standardized testing is detrimental to students' education because these tests evaluate students for the wrong reason. The data is not used to help students, rather it is used to determine their worth. These tests also don't help close the achievement gap between all different kinds of students. Finally, the poverty problem isn't addressed, which creates bias among students.
The media is divided about this topic, but research tends to agree standardized testing is more harmful than helpful. Kevin Kumashiro, an expert in education policy, reform, social justice, and educational equity, weighs in on this topic in his novel Bad Teacher. Through his research and experience detailed in the novel, he reveals that tests don't fix the achievement gap. They are actually leaving a lot of students behind. The tests aren't objective. The questions often cater to a certain group of students. Next, there's also cultural bias. Questions tend to focus on white American culture and don't encompass a wide range of lives and experiences. And finally, the scores don't reveal much. They're actually just numbers and they don't tell us the reasons behind them. This quote by Kumashiro explains the question selection process and reveals its biases towards a certain group of students. This quote reveals why standardized testing is overall inconsistent and vague in what the numbers actually mean. Thus, the numbers are misunderstood and misused. These points by Kumashiro affirm the positions of Strauss and Erickson and contradict those of Gandhi.
James Popham, an expert and professor in education and information studies, proves that standardized testing is harmful through his research. He touches on the fact that these tests create unnecessary pressure and stress on both students and teachers. Students and teachers should be more focused on learning and teaching rather than test scores. Next, the questions in the tests are only projected at the so-called smart kids. If the tests are going to be helpful and accurate, the question should include all students and their unique learning styles. Finally, the tests are not reflecting on what kids are learning outside of school. If the tests are only reflecting on what is taught in school and students are getting outside help at home, it puts some students at a disadvantage. This quote by Popham promotes the idea that our society is using the wrong thing to measure the knowledge and quality education of our students. The second quote further details the unfair question selection process that favors only one half of the students. This final quote reflects on the in and out of school factors that contribute to scores. The score reflects points 1, 2, and 3, but it is treated as if the scores only reflect what's taught in schools, so schools are unfairly evaluated for factors out of their control. In conclusion, it is clear that if standardized testing is going to stick around, a lot is going to have to change for it to become helpful rather than harmful.